Welcome to Mentoring Moments. Mentoring Moments is a sub-series of the eCommerce Edge podcast. It is composed of clips taken from Jason's one-to-one and group mentorship sessions. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Mentoring Moments. I'm here with my mate Kevin again, and he's got a fantastic agenda lined up for us today with questions as part of our one-to-one mentorship session. So over to you, Kevin. Let you blast away with your questions.
All right, awesome. I appreciate that. So my first question is, what type of advice would you have for someone that's a commerce consultant or someone that focuses on the B2B commerce space that needs to have a better understanding around different ERPs? Because I think one of the challenges with ERP implementations or different technologies, they're all different from each other. And oftentimes when customers have a conversation about what information they want to get from their ERP to expose in their commerce solution, it can be difficult to have those type of conversations if you're not proficient around the ERP solution that they're using. And again, it can be pretty wide ranging. How would you recommend a commerce consultant be conversational around what their ERP looks like?
I wouldn't actually say that most consultants in the B2B e-commerce space necessarily need to be an expert in multiple ERPs. I think as long as you understand the concepts that most ERPs operate by, like for example, I'm pretty well versed in NetSuite, pretty well versed in D365, and pretty well versed in Odoo because I've done projects with all three of those platforms previously. And so I'm pretty I've done architecture around many more ERPs than that. But in terms of being really involved in the actual implementations, the scoping, the architecture, the integration architecture, et cetera, those would be the three that I'm the most familiar with. But I go into client engagements routinely where they've got different ERPs than those three. So I'm brought in as an e-commerce consultant, maybe for a replatform of an e-commerce platform or an initial implementation for the very first time of a B2B e-commerce platform, whatever. And I think because I at least know one ERP very well. I actually know more than one, but I think for most people, as long as they have been through a ERP implementation or they've worked in an ERP before or they've had to integrate with an ERP before, as long as they understand the concepts of how an ERP functions in a business and the kind of components and jobs and roles that it fulfills in a business, I think that's really enough. Like I said, I'll go into projects now where there'll be some weird and wonderful local or regional ERP that's popular, that's maybe an on-prem ERP, or it's an ERP they've had in their business for the last 15 years or something like that, and they've heavily customized it. They've built custom applications on top of that ERP. And most of the time, I don't need to get my hands dirty inside the ERP, because they have an ERP partner that they already work with to maintain, to implement, to extend, to enhance, to support them in their ERP. They've already got an ERP partner. So I'm not going to come in and be that strategic ERP consultant. That's not what I'm going to do unless they're actually going through a search and select process for a new ERP, in which case I need to get much more involved in that. But I still won't be doing the implementation, just like I don't do e-commerce implementations. So I work with partners who I can recommend to them, depending on which technology they want to implement, to help them actually do the implementation after we've done the solution architecture. And so I actually don't think you need to be an ERP expert as a B2B commerce consultant. You need to understand how ERPs function. You need to understand GLs. You need to understand subsidiaries. You need to understand reporting. You need to understand save searches. You need to understand how to get data in and out of that platform. You need to understand the data models that exist in that platform around product data model, customer data model, etc. But I can usually figure that out, even if it's a new ERP that I've never dealt with before, usually by getting the brand to do an export of, say, 10 or 20 or 50 sample products out of the ERP, export that to a CSV that I can look at and I can scan through and I can see how the data is structured in the ERP. And the same with customers. If I can get them to export, say, 10 sample customers, the company structure, the user structure, however that data is structured inside the ERP, if I can get them to export that to a CSV so I can see what's there and to see what's possible and to see, for example, some ERPs like to control all of the parent products and their variants in a very uniquely structured way and link variants together with their parent products. I need to understand how that works. I need to understand how that looks. Is everything in the ERP an individual SKU, and then maybe you just have a custom attribute that links parent with children products together? Or do they have a formal data structure inside the ERP that links products and variants together, like a -1, -2, -3, -4 that denotes the variant based on the SKU? Or is there an MPN, a manufacturer's part number, that we bring in and we link together? Or as long as I can understand how the ERP prefers to structure its data, and then therefore also what is exposed to the API layer, and assuming it has one, and unfortunately not all ERPs, especially legacy ERPs, have a comprehensive API layer that you can easily connect to and get data in and out of. Sometimes it's literally we're having to create an OBDC connector to that ERP's database, or sometimes we have to set up a cron job for a CSV export that then gets dumped to a SFTP server that then gets picked up by a middleware tool, which then gets pushed into the ecom platform and vice versa. So I guess I said all that to say that as long as you are familiar with how an ERP works in a business, what jobs it usually does, how it likes to structure its data, how you can get data in and out of it, what system to use to do that, and as long as you have or can develop a great working relationship with their ERP partner to answer any of the technical questions that they might not know the answer to. Because sometimes when I go in and I'm consulting, they don't know. They go, like our partner deals with our ERP. Like we work in it each day as a user or as a subject matter expert inside the business, or maybe as a finance team, we work inside the ERP, or maybe as a fulfillment team, we work inside the ERP. But in terms of how it's configured, how it's set up, how it's maintained, our partner worries about that. So as long as when you're going through discovery, if any questions that they can't answer about their ERP implementation, as long as you have someone that you can reach out to ask those questions of and get those answers, I think that's the most important thing, because you have to know the questions to ask. And if you've never done an ERP implementation before, or you've never integrated with an ERP platform before, or you've never had to think about the data flows in and out of an ERP before, it's going to be hard to even be able to do discovery on that. But if it would be a little bit of a misnomer to say if one ERP you know them all, but if one ERP you know all of the important facets of how an ERP operates conceptually. Even if you don't know the specifics, at least the concepts of an ERP. An ERP with a CRM, an ERP in relation to inventory management, ERP in relation to warehouse management, ERP in relation to order management, ERP in relation to product data management, customer data management. All these concepts, if you've worked with an ERP in detail at some point in your career. So I don't think you need to be an expert on all of them.
Are there any known ERPs that are difficult to integrate with certain commerce solutions? You've worked with a lot of different customers on their implementations, and if a customer mentions that they have so and so ERP, do you automatically say, based off of the ERP using, these certain commerce solutions work best with you because they architecturally can connect better, or there's some commerce solutions that have a hard time with the integration between that? What does that typically look like?
They've all got their idiosyncrasies. Let's put it that way. Every single one of them. And SAP, in my experience, especially older versions of SAP where they don't have a RESTful API layer, and so you're dealing with SOAP with the older versions of SAP, I've had real challenges with that in the past. Any reasonably modern ERP that's got REST APIs makes it pretty easy to integrate with, but almost every single, I can't think. In fact, I don't think I've ever been involved in a project where there wasn't either an iPaaS middleware platform required or a custom integration required in the middle. There are some, in theory, ERPs or quasi-ERPs. I would put Sin7 in the quasi-ERP camp because it doesn't do the financials. It integrates with Xero to manage financials. And so any ERP that can't do financials, I don't consider an ERP. I consider it a quasi-ERP. It's a business management platform, but if it doesn't do financials, I don't consider it an ERP. And so there are some quasi-ERPs that are harder to integrate than others, but I have yet to come across an ERP implementation we couldn't integrate with somehow. The more complex ones or the hardest ones to integrate with are the ones where you need to build like a custom ODBC connector, where you're connecting directly to a backend database because there's no formal way to easily get CSVs out and into that platform without they don't provide any automation in those. I was working with, and I won't say the name because I don't want to slander anybody, but I was working with an ERP where we were looking to integrate with this ERP that was part of a dealer management platform for spare parts, both vehicle dealerships as well as spare parts dealers and sellers, right? And it was being used by a retailer that was they sold four-wheel drive parts components. They had a secondhand side of their business where they were like wrecking four-wheel drive and selling parts, but then they also sold brand new components, parts, suspension upgrades, roof racks, light bars, they did everything for four-wheel drives basically. And they were using a quote unquote ERP platform that was designed specifically for the automotive space. Unfortunately, this platform had no API layer. It had no documentation about how to integrate with it or how to get data in and out of it. Everything that we did around the architecture required the vendor. We had to book time with the tech person on the side of the platform vendor themselves. And usually we would have to give them like a month's notice to book in time with one of their tech leads. And this was an exceptionally painful project. They had to create custom scripts. So in order to integrate with them, they had to set up the SFTP server for you. They had to create custom internal scripts to export data out to a CSV, dump it onto the SFTP server, and anything you wanted to pull into the system from external systems, you had to export out of those systems, dump to a CSV, put it on that same FTP server, and then they would write custom bash scripts to pull in those files and integrate it into their platform. And this is unfortunately a reasonably common scenario when we're talking about very niche ERPs that service very specific niche verticals. This is something that is very common. And we also see this exact same situation with many point of sale systems that are non-SaaS, that are on-prem, and they require custom integration where they don't have an API layer. They don't have a standard way of integrating. They want to be the single source of truth for the business, and they want to stay sticky with these businesses. And they know that if they make it too easy to get data in and out of their systems, then it makes it easy to switch systems, right? And so this is the most common thing that I see. Point of sale systems that are highly vertically specialized. Now, obviously, if you're talking about a Vend or you're talking about a Lightspeed or you're talking about like major global point of sale systems that are SaaS, they almost all have very standard ways of integrating, very well documented APIs, RESTful API systems, very well documented series of webhooks and triggers and all sorts of other things. But it's when we get into very niche areas or very regionalized ERP, say, or very regionalized point of sale system that's like popular just in New Zealand or just in Australia, or these local players that have the local market almost completely sewn up, they have no incentive to make it easy to integrate with their systems. And so they don't.
So what would be your recommendation for customers that want to understand the cost of integration once they move forward with the ERP? Because one thing that I try to tell customers when they're selecting ERP is not just to think about the ERP itself, but all your future plans that may exist that need to connect with the ERP. And I'm sure that when you're thinking about cost of technology, you're typically just thinking about licensing cost and maybe the initial implementation for ERP. But it's hard, I think, to predict that eventual cost for integration later on. And I expect that to be really expensive. So how do you recommend customers like think about that?
So in this particular I'll use this 4x4 parts seller situation as an example. So unfortunately, this new ERP had only been in the business for 12 months, and they had spent an absolute truckload of money in getting it implemented. And they had spent about 9 months getting it implemented in the business. And so there was no chance, literal no chance, that they were going to rip out. Because I said, what is your appetite to potentially looking at some ERP alternatives to what you have today? Because when we started digging under the bonnet and when we started realizing just how hard it was going to be to do this integration with the system, I was like, what is your appetite for looking at alternatives to this ERP? Because it looks like it's going to be very hard, very expensive, and very time consuming to integrate with. And we're going to be totally at the mercy of the vendor to do their side of the integration. And we're going to be completely at their mercy. They can charge whatever they like. We're literally going to be, we're forever, anytime we want to change the integration architecture, anytime we want to add a field, anytime we want to do anything, we're going to have to go back to them. And we're completely at their mercy. And they just said, look, there's no chance. There's no chance we're going to replace our ERP. That is not, we haven't even gotten the ROI back on our ERP yet. Like, we're talking like we need to have this thing for at least 5 years to make it worthwhile, all the effort we put into getting it put in. So it's like, okay, in that scenario, just be prepared. And it was part of the risk register that we started to develop around this project and around the integrations. It was like, this is a major risk factor to this project, because it's not just threatening all the integration points with that ERP, but it's threatening all the other systems, because we're integrating like 5 or 6 external systems, not just ecom, to this ERP to be able to drive certain functions within the business. And it was like, this is now putting in jeopardy the timelines and the dependencies of every other system we're now trying to integrate with this core piece of your business system. And I can't tell you how long it's going to take. I can't tell you how difficult it's going to be until we actually start doing this and we start scheduling scoping sessions with the vendor, and we know what the availability looks like. And there's just so many unknowns going into this scenario. You need to be aware that this is the single biggest risk factor for this project. Mm-hmm. It's all the, like, we can cover all the risks and we can mitigate almost every other risk in this project by having fallback partners and fallback solutions and all sorts of other things. But with this piece, there is no reasonable risk mitigation we can do here, because they don't have partners. The vendor doesn't have partners. They only do the implementations themselves, and they only do the integrations themselves. And so I said, look, short of looking at an alternative ERP that has an out-of-the-box integration layer that is well documented, well known, has webhooks, all that sort of stuff, this is going to be a hard project because of this challenge. And I just had to put that on their radar as the biggest risk of project failure, was because of this dependency on this one single vendor and one single implementation partner. So what I would usually say is, and they said to me, I wish we would have met you a year ago before we implemented this damn thing, so that we knew what to look for in a new ERP for our dealership management. And I said, look, they said, what would have been the 2 or 3 things you would have said for us to ask of a vendor at the time we were vetting vendors, because we had 3 or 4 on our short list. And I said, without a doubt, the number one question you should be asking is, how do we integrate with this system? And if they can't tell you that up front, take them out of consideration, because in today's world, integration is everything between systems. I haven't ever dealt with a project in the last decade. I haven't dealt with a project that did not have significant amounts of system integration as part of the project. So the reality is, it just doesn't happen today. Every single project I'm involved in has massive amounts of system integration considerations. And so if the system you're looking at implementing, if the ERP you're looking at implementing doesn't have a well-documented API layer, or well-documented way of getting CSVs in and out of the platform, or very good webhook and triggering system with messaging and events and error handling and all that, if it doesn't have all that stuff, then you should probably look elsewhere, because this is going to make your project exponentially harder, exponentially more time consuming, and exponentially more expensive. And so those are the things that I say, look, I can handhold you through this process, but even if you don't want to work with somebody like me through this ERP selection process or PIM selection process, or whatever it is, that's fine. But just make for damn sure that whatever system you choose is integratable and easily integratable. Because if it's not, this is going to make your life hell forever.
Okay. That was all the questions I had. Appreciate you meeting with me.
It was fantastic, man. Really good conversation. I think it was super interesting, and you always come with a great agenda. Can't wait to speak to you again in a couple of weeks.
I appreciate it.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Mentoring Moments with my mate Josiah here. And he's got a couple of good questions teed up for me today. So hand it over to you, Josiah. Fire away.
Thanks for having me again, Jason. So first question is around inventory management for smaller B2C brands. So context, I'm helping a lady who recently acquired a dormant jewelry brand in updating her Shopify store. So she offers 2 types of products, mainly custom-made rings and also pre-made ones. And then I noticed she's manually tracking inventory in an Excel spreadsheet. And so the whole process is super manual. And the process for getting the custom-made rings the diamonds and the rings is super manual too. So it's not just getting quotes from the customers, consulting them, but also the supplier relationship and inventory management. So getting quotes, meeting suppliers, going back and forth, updating inventory, everything can take weeks, which is how I came across her, because she wants to do partial deposits with our Shopify app. So I know many of our other Shopify apps merchants have a similar problem as well. They're relying on large spreadsheets to do inventory management, track everything. So I've noticed they're in this awkward spot where it's quite a lot of admin, but they're also hesitant to pay for a monthly subscription or pay for software. So I asked them about it, like Jason, as we both love to understand the why. So I asked them, why are they doing this? They say, oh, it helps me stay on top of everything. But from my perspective, freeing up time to work on their business will be super valuable and important as well. So I'm sure there's like gaps missing, that options out there, alternatives that they should be approaching this, and I'm obviously not aware of that, so we'll love your recommendations.
Yeah, look, I think one of the biggest challenges isn't necessarily inventory management. It's more for these smaller brands, demand planning combined with inventory forecasting and inventory management is the bigger challenge. So what size is their catalog? Like rough number of SKUs? Is it 100 SKUs or is it 10,000 SKUs?
At the moment, 60, but she already plans to expand more than that.
Yeah, look, it's a tough one because at her scale, are they roughly like $100,000 a year brand or a $5 million a year brand?
Oh, it will be 100,000 for now because it's been dormant, but previously it was around that mark.
Yeah, look, that is honestly the challenge when you are the size that they are at. They're in that really awkward in-between phase where it's difficult for them to justify expenditure on heavy-duty inventory management platforms, SaaS platforms, etc. But what I would probably recommend for someone that size is there's two apps in the App Store, and I've actually had them on the podcast before as well. There's several that do similar things, but one of them is called Predico, Prediko, Predico Inventory Management, and it starts at about 115. I think it's $120 a month is their bottom tier, which just isn't that expensive to automate all of your demand planning, your throughput, your inventory management. It plugs directly into Shopify. It pulls down all of your prior orders, inventory dates, seasonality, restocking dates from point of reordering with a supplier. So it starts to track supplier performance and take that into account when it does prediction of demand planning. It also takes into account how long is it going to take from the time we run out of this product for a supplier to resupply and restock the inventory. There's also another platform literally called Inventory Planner. It was originally bought by Bright Pearl, which then Bright Pearl was bought by Sage. So in theory, now Sage owns not only Bright Pearl, but also Inventory Planner. That's another one that's very popular. There's a few that are pretty well known and pretty popular in the space. Unleashed, another very popular inventory management, like standalone inventory management platform. There's another platform called Stocky. There's a few. If you just put inventory management into the App Store, there's 4 or 5 or 6 of these really popular inventory management / demand planning platforms. I've featured a bunch of them. I've featured 5 or 6 of these different ones on my podcast at different points in times, including Predico. So that's where I would suggest they start, because the reality is once they get to $1 million plus per year or $2 million plus a year, or let's say definitely by $5 million plus a year, it's probably going to justify more of an ERP scale backend platform that already has inventory and demand planning built into it than a standalone demand planning and inventory management platform. But to get them up and running relatively cheaply, relatively easily, and especially if they only have the Shopify channel, then this is perfect. Now, if you're omni-channel and you're taking orders through a series of stores, you're selling through Amazon, you're selling through multiple marketplaces, plus you're selling through a point of sale system, plus you're selling through Shopify, then this platform, you're going to have to do a lot more manual data entry or system integration. But if we're really only concerned about inventory management for Shopify, one of these standalone apps is perfect.
Yeah, and I love that you pointed out that it's not necessarily about just inventory management, but also about demand planning as well. So I've taken note
Correct.
of that, and I'll
Correct.
yeah, and it's great that I can just share the links to the other podcasts with her. That's great.
Yeah, absolutely. Because we've had Predico on, we've had 4 or 5 we've had 4 or 5 of these lightweight inventory management / demand planning platforms on the podcast in like the last 6 months. So she can just look back across our history and she can see a few of those.
Amazing, thank you. So second question is around back to our app. So question around setting expectations, or how should I put this? Saying no to the bigger brands. So again, context. We've fortunately had a few big brands. So they're on Shopify Advanced and Shopify Plus, showing interest in the app, which is amazing. Super happy about it. But we're still early days. We've just been 3 months publicly listed on the App Store. So we're simply not there yet in terms of integrations and some functionalities like POS and B2B and wholesale. So how do I find a common ground where I can offer a temporary solution, but not shoot ourselves in the foot, i.e., give away our future potential customers to other competitors? Because they're like, they look at our app, they're keen on the UI UX, but obviously if the functionality is not there, then it is not there. And I love to stay in touch with them and help them shape our features to help them run their pre-orders and deposits, etc.
I would there's a couple of waitlist platforms if you don't want to build it yourself. There are third-party, very inexpensive SaaS waitlist platforms. In fact, I started using one recently called, give me 1 second here, it's called Launch List, one word, and you can put them into, you can get them to sign up for a waitlist. You can effectively have them enter a beta trial program, so that effectively the waitlist is like, hey, when we release these new beta features that I think would be suitable for a brand of your scale and your needs and your requirements, let's put you on the waitlist. You'll be the first set of people that we reach out to beta test these new features, either for free or at a discount, so that you can give us feedback. You can test these features and functions out. You can start giving us feedback. We can tweak, we can test, we can get it just absolutely bang on before we start actively selling it into the market. But let's track this instead of just having you could always just do it via Google spreadsheet or something like that. But it sometimes makes people feel a little more special if it's like a more formal wait list. And you can even have some sort of incentive tied to that to say, look, the first 50 people that go on first 50 brands that go on the wait list get XYZ as a bonus for being a part of our beta test cohort for these new features and functions. There's lots of things you can do about this, but I think if you use professional waitlist software that can automatically follow up, notify people of progress, all that sort of stuff, I think that's going to be the easiest way to go.
Yeah. And should I mention competitors at all? Because I feel like it's shooting ourselves in the foot. If we think what's best for the customer, what they need right now, then potentially we should. Yeah.
Yeah, look, I think as long as you're transparent around rough timeframes, if you say, look, we think we will have most of these features and functionality to suit you released within the next 6 months.
Yeah.
So as opposed to an open-ended wait list, you're saying, hey, look, here's roughly our timeline of these major feature releases over the next, say, 12, 18 months. This is our roadmap, right? Then it's up to them. It's up to them if they're happy to wait for that 3, 6, 12, 18-month mark for those major feature releases, then fine, that's up to them. But at least if you're transparent, as opposed to saying, hey, it's coming soon, because soon is a little bit different to everyone, right?
Yes.
So I think you could pretty easily contextualize soon as being 18 months. It wouldn't necessarily be a lie, but it wouldn't necessarily be what your customers or prospects would think of as soon. If someone says soon to me, I'm thinking 6 months max. I'm thinking 3 to 6 months, and this feature is going to be ready to rock, right? So my belief is that so long as you are as transparent and honest as you can possibly be, so that if that soon is 12 months and they're not comfortable with waiting for 12 months, they can look for alternative products and platforms. You don't necessarily need to give them the names of alternative products and platforms, but at least at that point, then they can go and do their own homework, they can do their own research, and they can look at alternatives if they want to. So I think as long as you're transparent, honest, straightforward, and realistic with your timelines about these major feature requests, to me, that means you're acting with integrity. And that, to me, that's the ultimate judgment call.
Yep. Yeah. Similar to your advice last week about talking about the ROI, it's all about transparency.
Totally. Yep. How you arrived at those data points. 100%.
Yeah. Thanks for that. Yeah. It's just unfortunate that we're still too early in our journey.
But the reality is that people really respect that. And even if right now they go somewhere else, the reality is those other platforms may fall flat. They may go out of business. They may run out of funding. They may not give great customer service. There's lots of things that can happen out there in the market that if you do the right thing and they go somewhere else, they may come back. And in fact, oftentimes as a consultant, I will tell people that, look, if you think that either I'm too expensive or I can't start with you straight away and I need to start with you next month because I've got a wait list or whatever, then by all means, absolutely go out there and find an alternative consultant or an alternate agency that you think can help you out. And back when I was in agency land, when we put proposals forward or whatever, if clients thought we were too expensive or again, it was going to take us too long to do the build because we wanted to do a really good, thorough, complete job, I always encourage people, hey, look, go and assess the alternatives. And then when things oftentimes don't work out with them, you'll come back to me and you'll recognize the value and you'll be super excited. It's super stoked. It won't be me convincing you to work with us. It'll be an absolute no-brainer for you to work with us after you've seen what else is out there in the market. And look, the Shopify market is huge, right? It's millions of stores. So I always operate from a mindset and a heart set of abundance versus scarcity. And so I think if you operate from that same place, and I know it's hard as a startup. Look, I've started multiple startups in my career, so I know what this feels like. But if you genuinely operate from this place of believing in your heart of hearts that if you do the right thing, you will always get your fair share of the market. And I genuinely believe that about me, and I genuinely believe that about my services. So I never stress about running out of clients or running out of business, or it's just, we're going to go through, every business goes through periods of lean and periods of plenty. That is just the business cycle, and it's completely normal, and you can't stress about it. So long as you continue to do the right things, you continue to avoid as many wrong things as you possibly can, you're doing things with the right intention, you're pricing fairly, you are genuinely solving a need that you think you do in a unique way, I think, look, you're setting yourself up for the best possible level of success that you possibly can. And you just have to keep the faith, is what I say. You have to keep the faith. And even when times get a little bit tough, right now, the market is tough out there. Like even I'm feeling it in terms of the number of inbound requests that I'm getting every week and month has definitely slowed down over the last, say, 4 months. I've seen it. I feel the slowdown in the amount of DMs that I get and emails that I get and bookings for intro meetings with me. Those have all slowed down, right? Am I panicked about that? No, because I know that this is seasons. Business is seasonal like that. There's a lot of uncertainty in the US right now about the presidential election, what's going to happen with taxes. There's some macro stuff going on that's got nothing to do with me. It's got nothing to do with me doing bad work. I'm doing the same good work I've always done, but the macro industry is in a challenging place right now. And so I just have to ride that storm out. And I've kept enough retained earnings in my business to be able to do that for a long period of time. And I've got some really solid foundational clients that have been with me for a long time and hopefully will be with me for a long time more. And so, look, I just think we have to take the market as it comes and just do our very best with the information and capability we have at the time. And most importantly, don't beat yourself up about it. Because at the end of the day, if you're doing the right thing and you can sleep well with yourself at night and not feel guilty about anything that you did that day, just keep going on, because business is just fucking hard. It's just the way it is.
Yeah, that's solid advice. Very stoic approach. Thank you, Jason.
No worries, man. Look, you just strike me as the kind of person that you do act with integrity. You do act with honesty. You just are doing your best. And I think that's the only thing we can expect of ourselves. Expecting miracles, not realistic. Expecting us to do our best, that's realistic. And I think you're doing that. If you'd like to get mentored by Jason for free, head over to greenwoodconsulting.net, scroll to the bottom of the page, and click Get Mentored by Jason.